Did you know that the United States and the United Kingdom almost went to war over a pig? On the surface, it sounds absurd, but that's exactly what happened in 1859 on a small group of islands in the Pacific Northwest. Known as the Pig War, which is a really inventive name, this peculiar chapter of history is not about grand battles or strategic maneuvers. Instead, it's a story that starts with a farmer, a wandering pig, and a potato patch. Situated between what we now know as Canada's Vancouver Island and the US state of Washington, the San Juan Islands were the centre of a heated dispute between the United States and the United Kingdom. Both nations believed they had a rightful claim to the islands, thanks to an ambiguous boundary laid out by the Oregon Treaty of 1846. As American settlers and British employees of the Hudson's Bay Company both moved in, tensions simmered beneath the surface. But what could have turned into a serious international conflict took an unexpected turn when a single gunshot echoed across San Juan Island. So how did this comical sounding pig war almost change the course of history? And why did cooler heads ultimately prevail? Let's explore this fascinating and almost unbelievable tale of diplomacy, misunderstanding, and of course, one very unlucky pig. Before we continue, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. We're new to YouTube, but we'll be bringing you more content like this very soon. To understand how the Pig War unfolded, we need to go back to 1846, when the United States and the United Kingdom signed the Oregon Treaty. This treaty aimed to end the long-standing dispute over the border between American territory and British North America. The treaty specified that the border should run through the middle of the channel that separates the continent from Vancouver Island. Simple, right? Well, not exactly. The problem was that two different straits could fit that description. The Haro Strait to the west, favoured by the Americans, and the Rosario Strait to the east, preferred by the British. This ambiguity left the San Juan Islands strategically located between the two straits in a diplomatic no-man's land. Both nations saw the islands as a valuable asset, not just for their natural resources, but for their strategic position controlling access to the region's waterways. The stage was set for a potential clash, as neither side was willing to back down from what they believed was rightfully theirs. As negotiations dragged on without resolution, the island remained a tense shared territory. It was only a matter of time before someone, or something, would ignite the simmering tensions and bring the two nations to the brink of war. Little did anyone know that something would be an unsuspecting pig. The spark that lit the fuse of this bizarre conflict came on June 15, 1859. Lyman Cutlar, an American farmer who had settled on San Juan Island, discovered an unwelcome visitor in his garden, a black pig rooting around and feasting on his potatoes. Now, this wasn't the first time Cutlar had dealt with this particular pig, and, frustrated by the repeated trespassing, he grabbed his rifle and shot it dead. Little did Cutlar know, this simple act would send shockwaves through the delicate political situation on the island. The pig belonged to Charles Griffin, an Irishman employed by the British-owned Hudson's Bay Company. Griffin's pigs were notorious for wandering freely, but this time the consequences were dire. When Griffin found out about the fate of his pig, he was furious. Cutlar, feeling some remorse, offered to pay Griffin $10 as compensation, equivalent to a few $100s today. But Griffin wasn't satisfied. He demanded 10 times that amount. The argument obviously escalated, and Griffin reported the incident to the British authorities, who threatened to arrest Cutlar for his actions. Alarmed by the prospect of a British arrest on what they considered to be American soil, the local American settlers rallied together and called for military protection. What started as a simple dispute over a wandering pig now had the potential to erupt into a full-blown international incident. When word of the conflict reached Brigadier General William S. Harney, the US Army commander for the region, he saw an opportunity to assert American dominance. Harney, known for his fiery anti-British sentiments, wasted no time. He dispatched Captain George Pickett and 66 soldiers of the 9th Infantry Regiment to San Juan Island, with orders to prevent any British forces from landing. Pickett, eager to make his mark, took his small contingent and planted the American flag near the Hudson's Bay Company's sheep ranch. This audacious move put the American soldiers in direct confrontation with the British, who were not willing to concede the territory so easily. The British response was swift. Governor James Douglas of British Columbia, alarmed by the Americans' show of force, dispatched 3 warships under the command of Captain Geoffrey Hornby to assert British authority. As the ships anchored off the island, their guns trained on Pickett's tiny force, the situation became dangerously volatile. With tensions escalating by the day, both sides continued to reinforce their positions. By August, nearly 500 American soldiers and 14 cannons faced off against 5 British warships armed with 70 guns and carrying over 2,000 men. It was a classic standoff. 2 nations on the brink of war, each unwilling to back down. British Governor Douglas urged Captain Hornby to drive the Americans off the island, but Hornby, recognizing the gravity of the situation, hesitated. He awaited the arrival of Rear Admiral Robert L. Baines, the commander of the British Navy in the Pacific, hoping cooler heads might prevail. When Admiral Baines finally arrived, he assessed the absurdity of the situation and famously refused to escalate the conflict. He declared that he would not, in his words, involve 2 great nations in a war over a squabble about a pig. And so, with warships and cannons ready to fire, both sides held their breath, waiting to see if reason would overcome the brinkmanship that had brought them so perilously close to disaster. Back in London and Washington, news of the escalating crisis caused shock and disbelief. How had a disagreement over a pig gotten to the point where hundreds of soldiers and warships were facing off, ready to kill each other? Both governments realised that this ridiculous situation could easily spiral into a full-blown war between the 2 powerful nations. Swift action was needed to defuse the entire thing. US President James Buchanan decided to send an experienced diplomat and military leader, General Winfield Scott, to negotiate a peaceful resolution. Known for his skill in handling border disputes, he had already resolved 2 tense situations with the British in the past. Scott was the right man for the job. Meanwhile, on the British side, Rear Admiral Robert L. Baines was also committed to avoiding a needless war. He and Scott began negotiations with the local British governor, James Douglas. Recognizing the utter absurdity of the situation, they all agreed that immediate steps had to be taken to de-escalate. After several weeks of diplomatic wrangling, the 2 sides reached an agreement. They decided that both nations would retain joint military occupation of the island, each limiting their presence to a token force of no more than 100 men. The British set up camp on the northern end of the island, while the Americans established their camp on the southern tip. Though the military presence was reduced, the question of sovereignty remained unresolved. For the next 12 years, these small garrisons coexisted peacefully, their soldiers often socializing and even celebrating holidays together. The biggest threat to the peace during this period, reportedly, was the ample supply of alcohol rather than any lingering political tensions. Finally, in 1871, both nations agreed that it was time to settle the issue once and for all. They turned to international arbitration, a relatively new concept at the time, and chose German Emperor Wilhelm I as the arbitrator. It was now up to Germany to decide whether the San Juan Islands would belong to the United States or remain under British control. After months of deliberation, on October 21st, 1872, the decision came down in favour of the United States, and the San Juan Islands were given to the Americans. With the decision finally made, the British Royal Marines withdrew from their camp on November 25th, 1872, ending their presence on the island. Finally, this land dispute was over, without a single shot fired in anger, apart from the one that killed the pig, of course, in the first place. Today, the peaceful San Juan Islands are a far cry from the tense battleground they once were. The Pig War, despite its comical name and unusual origin, stands as a unique example of how diplomacy can prevail over conflict. It's a story that reminds us that people with a bit of common sense can prevent needless bloodshed. Both the American and British camps on San Juan Island have been preserved as part of the San Juan Island National Historical Park. Visitors can still explore these sites where the Union Jack is raised daily at the British camp, a tradition maintained by US park rangers. This is one of the few places in the United States where the flag of another nation is regularly hoisted, a gesture that speaks to the enduring friendship between the 2 countries. So, if you ever find yourself standing on the windswept bluffs of San Juan Island, looking out over the peaceful waters, it's worth remembering that this tranquil place was once the centre of a massive international crisis. One that ended not in battle, but in a handshake. A story that shows us that sometimes the most powerful weapon in diplomacy is a sense of perspective and a willingness to talk, even over something as small as a pig. Thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Thank you.